Let's get that set. All right, I think we are live, or I'm live, and it is 7 o'clock Eastern Time in the U.S. I am Amy of Sew Simple of Lynchburg and home of amyquilts.com. We're here in my little studio here at our shop. Our shop is in Lynchburg, Virginia. I am a Janome dealer as well as a machine educator and teacher of free motion and all things Janome, which I love teaching my customers how to get the most out of their machines. And we're going to get on to some quilting. And let me grab a little water first. So I've just started doing these weekly lives at 7 o'clock Eastern Time here on YouTube. These are live. I'm going to flip the camera around and let's get looking at my project. So this is called, simply enough, the Teapot Quilt. It's made from a pattern by Jason Yenter, as well as these fabrics are by him for In the Beginning Fabrics. And it's just been a delight to quilt on. It's going to be a shop sample. So let's bring you guys down here for a little better view. I am using a Janome 15,000. And this is my personal machine. And, oh, I see there are some eyeballs watching. If you're watching, give me a thumbs up or a hello. Let me know if the sound is good. But we are going to do a little bit of ruler work tonight. Hey, Patsy. Fancy meeting you here. A little more ruler work. A little more stitching on this lovely teapot quilt. And, oh, good. She says, it looks and sounds good. That's good to know. I was sharing with my Amy Quilts Facebook group that I really wanted to do a lot more ruler work tonight, but I've realized that a lot of my rulers are not here at the store. And so therefore, I'm kind of limited. I did change my needle. You can still hear it thunk a little bit when it gets into the heavier seam allowances, but it is much quieter since my last video. Let's get you guys in a little closer. I hate to get you in too close on ruler work because I want you to be able to see how I am holding the ruler and manipulating it. So we'll see how that works. If you'd like a different view or a close-up of the stitches, just let me know in the comments. If I don't see them right away, say something again, because the way YouTube seems to handle these live comments is they go on my screen for a little bit and then they disappear unless I go looking for them. So that makes it a little difficult to catch everybody every time. So, but I've been having a lot of fun with this quilt. I have really got to get it done. Just trimming off some threads here in the corner. So now typically when I quilt something like this is your standard quilt with blocks and sashing, I would stitch in the ditch on most of my main seam lines, like around the blocks, down the sashing, to stabilize everything. And because I'm using this as a teaching sample, I have also been quilting some of it as I go instead of stabilizing all of it. And that just gives me something interesting to quilt on for you guys or whoever. I do live quilting videos on my Amy Quilts Facebook page as well. I do have kits for this quilt available. I'm going to stop there and not stitch in the ditch here. We're going to fill in some of this space in the sashing with just a random all over kind of fill. I'm just embracing my quilter's ADD, and when I get bored with a certain design, then I switch to something else. And I don't change between my ruler work foot and my free motion foot. I find that I have good visibility on my ruler work foot. The settings work great for me, and it seems to work out fine. So let's get out in here. So for needle, I'm using a universal 9014. You can hear it kind of whacking into some of the seam allowances, but it handles them very well. There's no skip stitches or anything. And we need to work our way back up along that right or left-hand side of the sashing. Do a little paisley here. Just echoing that little ruffle that I put around this paisley. And I know that you probably can't see some of the stitching because of this thread color blends so well. Most of the time when I'm teaching, I like to use some contrasting thread or something that's, stands out just enough so you guys can see it well. But on this quilt, I did not do that. And let's see, have I stitched? Yeah, I've stitched in the ditch along here. So I am just going to come out of here and just fill in until I get to the left side of this block. So I think this is the third week now that I've done these live videos here on YouTube. So if you want to see anything else that I've done on this project, feel free to check those out. It's all been this quilt so far. Trying not to get too terribly detailed because I don't want this quilt to be really stiff. And let's see, what else? I don't know if I said this. We do have quilt kits available at amyquilts.com for this quilt. There are just a few because I only had a few of the jelly roll strips or 2.5-inch strips that make up part of the attic window blocks. So if you're interested, head over there. I'll put a link in the description of this video, or you can go to amyquilts.com and just search for the teapot quilt kit. I'm going to sneak from here right between there just to get my little paisley ruffle going and end up over on this side. Drawing is a great way to figure out when you need to do something like that so that you can end up where you want to be with your stitching, so that you don't work yourself into a corner and get stuck and have to break thread or travel stitch a bunch. So I'm almost to my corner where I want to be. I have 5 bazillion threads hanging off of me. Let's see. I have not seen hardly any comments. I hope y'all can see. Oh, look, I do have comments. Sorry. Tina says that the basic quilting ruler with the ruler foot. Yes, Tina, this is the Janome quilting ruler foot for free motion quilting on the 15,000. I've got it set up for the ruler work mode. Janome has the 15,000, the 9,400, 9,450 all have a special ruler work mode, and it will keep you from hitting your foot and your needle clamp together, which is pretty awesome. So like if I raise my foot up, it's not going to hit my needle clamp. If I raise my needle up and raise my foot up and then lower my needle will actually make the foot go down at the same time. And that way I don't have to worry about damaging my machine. So I did 2 classes with Craftsy on free motion quilting with rulers. And over I kept saying, you need to put your foot down before you put your needle down. If your needle is down, you need to raise it before you raise the foot so that you don't hit them together. And it was almost annoying just to keep doing it over and over again. So let's come in here and do another one of those big pebbles with a swirl. It's one of my favorite little things to do, and I can come out and I can echo around that. And I'm almost done here. Well, Tina, it does take a little practice, but I really think, anyone can do it if you work at it. So there is it's a learning process. And some people take to it easier than others, but that absolutely does not mean you cannot do it. And you can do it on a small machine or a big machine. Obviously, it's a lot easier on a big machine for bigger projects, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. Oops. It disappeared before I could see it there, Ginger. Hi, Ginger. 4.5-inch borders. I don't know what to quilt. Any suggestions? Not real good for so something easy. If you're doing any kind of ruler work yet, doing any kind of piano key border is really nice. It's just straight lines across your border, and so that's nice. Now I'm going to get my marker. So I did this last week, and we're going to do it rather quickly this week, where I just draw some guidelines. I am doing straight lines here in this corner where it's a right angle, and then it goes to a 45-degree angle over to the right. Let's give you guys a little better view. Over to the right, it's going to be a 45-degree angle, and so I'm slowly angling my stitches until we get kind of that 45-degree angle when I am into that corner. So this is one of those dual-ended Mark Be Gone pens. I love the disappearing ink. I don't use the Mark Be Gone side much. It's just a little harder to remove. The purple air evaporates. The more humidity you have, the better. Both ends can heat set, and you don't want to let these get warm. I've even had a little bit of it set in on a quilt when it was in a sunny window for a little bit. So you want to be careful, but I love the purple marker. I usually use a finer one. So this is my fine tip one, but I don't use it in videos because it's hard to see. So I use the bigger one. And I will need to mark another line probably before we get all the way to that corner. But the important thing I'm going to do is I am not going to go up and down, just like you see here. I'm going to rotate my quilt just a smidge. And if you've been having trouble getting your tension just right, I do have a couple of videos on correcting your tension for free motion here on this channel. You'll have to go back a ways to find them. But you can actually get some differences in tension in free motioning based on whether you're going forward and pulling the or pushing the quilt like you normally sew, or going backwards like pulling the quilt towards you. And so if I'm going to do a series of parallel lines, I like to get everything on an angle so that I don't have that issue. And I'm just eyeballing this. I could use my rulers, but I'm not going to. This, to me, if it was a bigger area, I would maybe do like a wood grain design, but it's just not wide enough, big enough to do a wood grain without getting too dense of stitching. Let's see. So I'm using my 15,000, and I'm using my foot pedal, and I'm just barely touching it. I could use my speed control slider on my machine to help keep it slow, but I speed up and slow down based on the design, and I do stitch slow. I think stitching slow helps avoid some anxiety about where to go and feeling like you've got to keep up with your machine. And so I stitch slow. It works for me. I know a lot of people get this idea that free motion quilting has to be super fast, and it does not. You do what feels comfortable for you. So we're right up into that teapot. But yes, I stitch slow. Let's see, if I was to touch my speed control slider and slide it down to where I'm currently stitching as far as speed, let's see. No, it would be slower than that. So if you have a Janome and you have a speed control slider, I can't speak to other models, other brands, but at least on a Janome, you're going to want to move that slider till it's underneath the little 2 arrows, like the very first one. So you've got 1 arrow, 2 arrows, and 3 arrows. And if you slide it down, this is with my foot all the way down, and this is about the speed that I stitch at. But find the speed that works for you first and foremost. But I hope seeing me stitch slow encourages you to try slowing down if you've been having trouble with free motion. But like I said, I like to have my speed control slider up faster so that if I'm doing more detailed work, I can speed up my machine. Now you see I've got some kind of little waviness and ripples here. Let me get a little closer again. And that is because I've got some areas that are quilted, some areas that are not, plus the stitch in the ditch. You want to make sure that your foot height on your machine, if you're using one of these non-hopping style feet, that it is not set too low. If your foot is set too low, then you're going to end up doing basically what I call plowing. And you'll end up with a pucker at some point. And we don't want puckers. All right, so now I'm stitching in the ditch along that seam line. And we're going to get the ruler back out. If I can figure out where I put it, half the time my rulers end up underneath my quilts. or in my quilts. There it is. So this is my new favorite street ruler. It's a little short. It's about 6 inches long, but because it's straight, I can move it up or down my line. But I do like a little bit longer. But what I love the most are these tabs. These tabs help with the spacing because when you quilt with a ruler, you are actually stitching 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the ruler. And so the tabs help you position the ruler. So I'm going to stitch in the ditch across here with the ruler. And now this particular spot doesn't quite help because there's not a seam line here, but I'll show you in a little bit where this can be a lot more helpful. So just stitching in the ditch. I mean, I did do every other line as I was coming through, but now we want to go around the teapot. And once I'm up near the top here, I might as well go ahead and fill in this little corner area just with some free motion for the background. Just coming over here to this corner and just do one of those big pebbles with the curvy line in it. And I've got it just going down into that sashing. I'm going to come up to this corner and I'm going to rotate again because I'm pulling the quilt towards myself. Remember, our thread still comes out the back of the needle. And so if I'm pulling it directly back towards myself, the angle would be right here. That thread has to go either to the left side or to the right side of the needle. And if I'm pulling it directly towards myself, it can switch from either side. And sometimes it goes right underneath the point of the needle, and the needle pierces the thread that's needed to make your quilting stitches. And you can get some shredded stitches, some shredded thread. Wow, that sounds really hissy. Sorry about that. Sound like a slithering snake. So I'm just trying to straighten out part of this. I don't keep my whole quilt flat. You can't see that because of the way I have the camera. But the whole quilt is kind of bunched around my machine. But if I'm going to use rulers, I got to have it flat where I am placing the ruler. So now I can put that little peg, that little notch, right along the seam line here. And I can look just past my sewing machine and get it right on the seam line on the other side. And stitch in the ditch. It's not super close to the ditch, but it works. I'm going to stop and reposition. Again, in this case, I've got my little notch. Let's see. Sorry. There we go. Now you can see it better. The little tab here goes along here. Make sure it's flat and straight. The other tab is against the seam. And again, I'm not pulling it directly at myself. It's not even a 45-degree angle. It's maybe a 25-degree angle. Can't quite tell. Patsy, I think you asked me, or somebody else asked me last week. I had not seen them until somebody else asked. I don't know. It's interesting. I can't say that I feel the need for a rear view mirror at this point, but who knows? It's something I have never considered. I suppose it could be very handy for checking your ruler if your ruler is kind of going off behind your machine. I certainly have done plenty of craning my neck under my machine to see behind the foot. And that is definitely one place where having a long arm or a sit down long arm style machine can be very useful for free motion. Is it has a lot better visibility. Now the Janome M7 has amazing visibility around the foot. You can go ahead and see kind of behind the foot, just because it's really the area around the needle is kind of tapered down, and you don't have as much machine kind of covering things up. But yeah, I haven't tried one, I know that, but I did look on the website when someone mentioned it last week. So the M7 is amazing to quilt on. Oh my goodness. So we're just stitching in the ditch around the inside of this attic window block. And see, now I'm moving my quilt through like I'm sewing it regularly. And you could do some of the stitch in the ditch with a walking foot if you wanted. With the free motion, I don't have to rotate and move my quilt as much, pivot it a lot, because I can stitch in whatever angle I want to with free motion. But it is definitely something that you can do. There we go. So I am really looking forward to seeing what Janome has for us in their new machine. Essentially, I think it's supposed to be an M7 with embroidery, but they have delayed the launch of that machine just due to issues with COVID and getting enough machines ready for dealers to use. All right, I'm just going to put my ruler to the side, and I'm just going to quickly stitch in. It's not really the ditch, but it just outside the applique. And I need to reposition my hands. Ginger, I have used a long arm. I am a Janome dealer, so we've had the long arm in here before, the Janome long arms in here, and we've sold them. And so I've used them. After having so much control stitching at my sewing machine, when you get on a long arm, it feels really loose and really out of control. Now, the long arms that we used for our floor models, and I say used because Janome recently came out with a 20-inch, and as soon as we have some more room in our shop or we move to a bigger shop, we'll be getting the 20-inch. So I went ahead and sold my 18-inch, and it had the robotics, so you could set it up to use the robotics, and that worked really well for some quilts. No, I mean, it worked well, period, but I liked using it for some quilts, simpler quilts, and I can free motion on a long arm, but I like to do really detailed work when I free motion, and I could not quite get the same level of detail on the long arm yet. I'm sure if I kept practicing, I could, but was not there yet when we sold it. But The basting on a long arm frame, I got to tell you, I really liked that. To not have to pin baste and to just roll it up onto the frame was pretty wonderful. But there is a lot to that that a lot of people don't mention when you're looking at getting a long arm. And I'm just moving my thread off to the side so that I can pop in here and quilt inside the handle and not end up having to break my thread, cut my thread, tie, whatever, and without stitching it all in. So I have to take my hands out of my gloves. I love my quilting gloves. And I got to take my hands out to move the magnification on my phone. So I'll just do a quick stitch in the ditch around here, and then I will fill in, and then we'll start doing some more background quilting. We have gone for half an hour, so I don't know that I'll go much longer. Yeah. Ginger, what machine are you sewing on? How much space do you have? You would be amazed at the difference just a couple of inches make. I know I was. When I went from my first Janome, which was just a standard sized sewing machine, and went to the Janome 6600, it just seemed like I had so much room. And then when I went to my first 11-inch throat machine, I just thought it was amazing. Oh, so you use the 15,000. See, I think it has a lot of room. But it does depend on, what kind of quilts you make. If you make a lot of king-size quilts, yeah, you're going to be struggling with it, I think. I do like the Janome long arms. And again, basting a quilt on the long arm frame is so nice. There's a little bit more to it. You're going to make sure your quilt's going to end up nice and square. So I'm just tying off those threads. And again, I'm going to lift that needle and I'm going to move. I raise my foot up with my knee lifts, and I can come in here, and I won't have to worry about stitching into those threads. Yeah, putting a big quilt together is hard to do. I do mine on a table, and even if I have to do it in sections, it still works for me. You don't have to do it on the floor. Your knees will thank you if you don't do it on the floor. So let's do a nice little feather. I love doing feathers. I am trying to keep those feather plumes a little shorter and fatter than I normally do. I just thought it looked better on this quilt. Maybe a little more traditional. And I have to remember that as I draw that spine in so that it fits the space I'm trying to fill. So I'm just coming back up. Put in a little paisley. I need to reposition my hands. My hands are getting away from the needle, and if you do that, you're going to end up getting some puckers and folds in the way. Yeah. Practice makes progress. I found drawing really translates well from, your hands to your brain and then back again. So that's definitely something to try. It also helps you learn to form a pattern in a way that you end up where you need to be instead of stitched into a corner. I have no idea what that was. Sometimes you make a shape and you're like, what the heck was that supposed to be? And I'm going to make a double layer of ruffles on this one so I can get back into that corner where I just was and fill in over here. It's a nice circular pebble there. Slow down a little bit. I do believe I'm getting low on bobbin thread, so we may have to finish real soon. Yep, getting low on my bobbin thread. If you're not familiar with Janome's and their bobbin thread checker on anything but the M7, because the M7's different and amazing, that ka-chunk ka-chunk is it checking my bobbin thread, and I just ran out. So that's going to be the end of this video. I'm going to raise that needle up. Come over here and let that thread cutter cut my top thread at least. And we can take a look at what I've stitched. But yeah, there's the end of my bobbin thread right in there. I like to go ahead and pull that up so I can find it again. One of the things I like to do if I need to come back is put a pin in so I can find it easier, because sometimes if you step away from a quilt for a while and then you come back, you've kind of forgotten where you were the last time, what you were doing, where you needed to come out. Sometimes you have an area where you want to go ahead and rip out stitches and you forget where it is, so I mark with a pin a lot of times. So let's zoom out. So there's the fill here. And of course we went around the teapot. We stitched in the ditch with the ruler. I free-handed these lines. Came over here. We filled in over in here. And it's starting to really come together. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next week, Friday live at 7 o'clock. That's Eastern time here in the U.S. Same time as New York. If you are from outside the U.S. and you need to check a time converter. Thanks for watching. This has been Amy from amyquilts.com. Bye-bye.